Okay, welcome back, everybody, to the Camper Report Show. And my guest today is Randy Hendrickson. And you may not know him, but he's probably impacted some of your camping experience over the last 40 years, maybe a little bit more, Randy.
Yeah, maybe a little less than 40, but we'll take that.
Give a little bit about your background because it relates to camping in the outdoor hospitality industry.
Yeah, sure. And thanks, Bob. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate it. Yeah, I first got started in the industry back in the mid 90s and started with one campground in Central Texas and got into it quite by accident via an investment client of mine who said he was buying an RV park, but didn't want to purchase it unless I would run it for him. And after I said, "You've got to be out of your mind," I realized pretty quickly this is an interesting business. So I really got smitten right off the bat. And ever since then, oh my gosh, I worked for a large company that owned multiple parks around the country. And eventually in 2003, splintered off from that and formed Horizon RV Resorts, which later became Horizon Outdoor Hospitality. And we were at the time one of the very few third party management companies exclusively serving outdoor hospitality. And I believe it's still one of the largest, if not the largest, independent third party management company. It did that for about 18 years, and we managed over 70 parks in 20 some states over that span of time, and sold the company about a year ago to Scott Foose, who ran the company for me for 10 years. Best in the business. Sorry, Scott, got to plug you. But he's taken Horizon to levels I never could have, and I'm just so pleased to see him taking off just like crazy, like gangbusters, like he has. Dynamic time in the industry, and he's certainly riding the tailwinds on that. And meantime, I jumped off of the management end and jumped into the brokerage. So I formed United Park Brokerage in 2018 with my partner Peter Meyer, and it's really kind of leveraging about 30 years in the industry. We've done everything from managing parks to development to brokerage and everything in between, kind of 360 degrees, every phase of the industry. I've kind of touched it in somehow, some way over the years, and now focusing exclusively on brokerage, but brokerage with a twist. And I won't get too deep in the weeds on you, Bob, but one of the things we do a little bit differently is not just transactional type of things. We want the buyers of parks, especially if it's their first time in the industry, to really kind of leverage some of the relationships we've forged over the years and help them be successful. So it's not just selling a park. It's also bridging intros to people in the industry who provide certain types of things they might need. It could be appraisers, insurers, it could be tents, it could be anything, because and we don't charge anything for that. We want them to be in good shape when they buy an asset and not just say, well, what do I do now? We want to try to fill in some of those blanks for them. So we take a little bit different approach, but it's in the better interest of the health of the industry in general, I think, if we can really provide a lot of services to somebody just coming into the business.
Well, that's so important because when you look at our industry today and how it's changed I've been in it 25 years and met you early on, but look at how it's changed and look at the number of people that are coming into our industry who have never been in it. And that's true of campgrounds and outdoor hospitality, certainly true of the RV consumer. So we have all these new consumers, 50% of which are first time buyers buying all these RVs, and they haven't owned an RV, but they've never been in a campground. And many of them are going to campgrounds where somebody has just purchased a campground or a larger company has consolidated some of those campgrounds. So if you look at this from a consumer perspective, what what do you have to say to them about this? Because you're seeing the same thing in the outdoor hospitality where you've got large consolidators and you have small mom and pop dealerships. And because I'm a small businessman, always have been, I come down on the side of the small business person. So what do you say to the consumer that looks at that and says, gee, I want to go to a big one or do I want to go to a small one? What factors come into play for the consumer?
It's a great question, Bob. The industry has changed, as we all know, just leaps and bounds. I mean, in the past 20 years, 10 years, let alone the last year, let alone the last 6 months, it's something that's always dynamic and shaping. There's a lot of institutional capital coming into the space, and many of them are looking to aggregate and consolidate several different properties. And that's the way of commerce. That's the way it's going to work. There's no stopping that. The interesting thing is, from my perspective, that the consumer actually benefits from that. And what I mean by that is when you have people coming into the industry that are providing really upscale or enhanced guest experiences, it kind of puts the pressure on everybody in the industry, small parks, the smallest park up to the biggest park, individually owned, to kind of up their game too. So, in essence, what's happened over the past few years is with the influx of what we'll call intelligent capital, there's been a real kind of return to what's making this business operate. Let's focus on the customer dynamic. Let's focus on what our customer is looking for, and let's give them that. Let's give them value for the money spent. Value is perceived when results exceed expectations, as the old saying goes. So when they're paying attention to the consumer data and saying, this is what our folks want to have when they come here, let's provide that. Arguably, it raises the tide for all vessels, as they say, right?
Mhm.
So overall quality has increased exponentially, and it's continuing to each and every day.
Yep, and that's what the consumer wants, and you're right, and some on the low end may drop off, but the fact of the matter is they're spending very good money for RVs, whether they spend $25,000 for a travel trailer or $250,000 for a fifth wheel. They want a certain level of experience, and that's what we've seen come into it. It's a much happier experience. Look at some of the large ones, even the large ones themselves have evolved where they had a bunch of campgrounds, but now they've changed those to RV resorts. They've got water parks, they've got amusements. They're becoming true destinations just for the campground or the RV resort itself versus somebody going to a campground and then leaving the campground every day to do something else. Talk about that dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, another one of those very important dynamics, Bob, that's been ever more present in recent years. And frankly, as an old industry vet, I'm really happy to see it. And it's kind of gone from a transactional type of lodging where you stayed for a night and went on to the next place, as you mentioned. It was a place to park, and you had to have it looking good and site level and what have you. And that was fine many years ago, but today it's kind of shifted from nobody really pays attention so much to what did I pay for the night as much as they do about what was the experience that I had. And the parks that are very successful these days, and these can be the smallest individually owned parks up to the big mega parks, is to make that not so much a place to stop over as to make it a base camp. And by base camp, one of the things that we've always stressed over the many years I've been in the industry is you want to sell the zip code if you own a park. That's what you really want to do. Some of the best amenities aren't on your property, they're in your local community. So leverage the relationships with museums, golf courses, steakhouses, what have you like that. Become a concierge. And lo and behold, what happens? You're helping the community, which of course we're huge supporters of small businesses. I'm one myself and big supporters of that. But when you're supporting your local community and local vendors and providing a good experience for your guests, now all of a sudden, what are they doing? They're saying, well, this is the place I want to stay. I'm having a great experience here. The park is attendant to my needs. They've got everything that I could want. And there's other things to do around here. And when I show up and say, hey, so-and-so RV resort sent me, I'm greeted by, that's wonderful. Please tell them we said hi. So when you can kind of leverage the local networks and you know what I mean, that
Yeah.
you've really increased your amenity pool just by networking in the local community. And that benefits the consumer as well, because now, by gosh, when you show up at some of these parks, you're treated like royalty, and they're hosting you, and then the true word of a host,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
guiding your tour.
You're right. And again, talking about the community, a lot of the smaller, medium-sized parks have made extensive renovations, but sometimes people tend to go to the name brand or the larger brand without checking out the other ones. And sometimes the park owners will get upset or be concerned if a KOA or a Jellystone or some large consolidator comes in across the street. And I've always said to my RV dealers that, everybody should wish that a Camping World or a Campers Inn opens up across the street. They have bigger facilities, there's no question. But guess what? They have more employees. They have to advertise more to fill all those campsites. There's going to be a lot of people coming into that town, that community that would never have found your park before, right?
Yeah, so true, Bob, and I'm glad you brought that up. I've heard from folks in the past and to the current day that are thinking about purchasing a park, and they say, well, what if a Sun Communities or a KOA opens up across the street? And my first reaction is to tell them, you should be so blessed. That's a great thing.
That's right.
And it takes them back a little bit at first, but when you think about it, if you or I are traveling to Baltimore, Maryland, and we've never been there before, we're likely to pick a Hilton, for example, because it's a known brand with a consistent guest experience. And we don't know everything that's around the area. We just want to go with something that we have some familiarity with. And so when you get there, you find out there's incredible B&B across the street or some other alternative accommodation that doesn't have the marketing budget of the Hilton. But lo and behold, there you are looking out your window, and there's a great little business across the street. Well, the next time you're in town, you'll stay at that great little business. So what's happened is you've just leveraged the marketing of the major flag, the major brand, to your benefit because you're pulling customers from that. And so it's nothing to fear. And,
No,
you
it's
know,
not.
and further to the point, there's some beauty in diversity, right? But I mean, Bob, you and I know this to be true, which is if you got a small park, medium park, whatever it is, if you can find out what your niche is that sets you apart and makes you different, if it's exceptional service, if it's so quirky decorating, whatever it might be that makes you different from that guy across the street, that's how you win anyway. And
That's right.
so the not everybody needs to have the antiseptic sameness. They want quirky and unusual. And by gosh, if you can do that, your small park can do just great next against that big franchise.
We really got a couple minutes left, Randy. But for those folks, I want to repeat our guest today is Randy Hendrickson with United Park Brokers. Talk a little bit. Every time you go camping, every camper you see at some point says, you know what, I think I'll buy a campground. I can do this and I can do it better. And the fear of the unknown doesn't phase them, but they want to do it. What three tips would you give to campers who fully understand the user experience in the campground that think they may want to buy a campground?
Get a good night's rest. Honestly, and I've heard it so many times over the years where somebody will be checking into a park and say, I'd like to do one of these when I retire. You've never worked so hard in your life as you have when managing a campground, RV park, RV resort. You have to wear so many hats. You've got to be an attorney and a plumber and a concierge, and you've got to wear all these hats and work insidious hours. Best advice is work at a park first, do a work camper stint or something like that. Work a season, actually see what happens in a park on a daily basis. Understand the culture primarily first and foremost. Is this the kind of culture that you identify with? Is a high service business something you want to be a part of, recognizing the hours involved? Am I really a people person? Do I really want to prosper within this thing? Understand what it is you're getting into. It's a business, yes, but it's also a lifestyle change of the highest order. And so if you're ready to make that lifestyle pivot, this can be an incredibly rewarding enterprise, no doubt about it. But learn. Just do all the education you can. Talk to everybody you can till your jaw falls off, and just keep learning, and live it.
Yep. And the most important thing you said it is, are you a people person? Because this is people up close and personal, and society is changing, people are changing, and that's what's changing a lot of the campground, the outdoor hospitality industry. It is a challenge, but it's a wonderful place to make a living, and we provide unique services for RV consumers and in that campground. Randy, I want to thank you very much for joining us today on the Camper Report Show. Any last words for our fans?
Bob, it's just been a pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity. I love what you do and all the podcasts out there. I think everybody benefits from these. If I've added anything, even the smallest bit to the queue, I feel very blessed. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Randy.